My name is Jill Cody, and welcome to Be Bold America. Be Bold America is a live, bi-weekly talk show for those who are motivated to step out with the bold actions necessary to begin reuniting this country, save our democracy, and who want to delve deeply to understand the challenges ahead. Today, our topic is Shift Happens and the American Upwising. As Bill Watterson, the creator of the clever Calvin and Hobbes cartoon strip, once said, "Reality continues to ruin my life." In America today, reality is ruining our lives. No one is unaffected. It is only experienced by degree. Yet I heard somewhere that when humor goes, there goes civilization. So we can't allow that to happen, can we? To keep our sense of humor, while we are all participants in a disruptive reality TV show, means we have big things to do. And to learn how we can make shift happen, and to be part of the great upwising, we'll be speaking with Steve Bhearman, also known as Swami Beyondananda, and Richard Stockton, Santa Cruz's very own political comedian, who will soon be bringing back Planet Cruise Comedy on November 23rd, 7:30 p.m. at the DNA Comedy Lab. Steve Bhearman is an author and humorist who spent the past 30 years writing and performing in the guise of the cosmic comic Swami Beyondananda. Swami's comedy has been described both as comedy disguised as wisdom and wisdom disguised as comedy. Prior to launching his career as a Swami, Steve was an educator, author, and publisher. As a political science major, and no, he never did get to dissect a politician in a poli-sci lab. Steve has always been a political solutionary, looking to apply what he learned about holistic health to the body politic. He has two websites, Wikipolitiki, and that's with a K instead of a C, and wakeuplaughing.com. Steve, welcome to Be Bold America. It is an honor to have you on the program, and thank you for being here.
Thank you so much. Thank you for that wonderful introduction and for handling and dealing with the issues that you're working with.
Well, it's because of wonderful people like you and Richard that help me face dealing with these issues. And I do have in my studio Richard Stockton. Richard is a stand-up comic who has appeared on dozens of national TV shows, performed as sketch comedy player on Live from L.A., headlined A-list comedy clubs from coast to coast, such as Improv, Punchline, Comedy Underground, Comedy Works, and more. His first book, Fondle the Fear, is now in its third printing. In 2014, he wrote and performed Are We There Yet? In Santa Cruz, Los Angeles, and San Francisco. Richard is currently completing his comedy tour of his one-man show, Planet of the Boomers. And he soon will be bringing back to Santa Cruz Planet Cruise Comedy, a live comedy variety show. And Richard's website is richardstockton.com. Welcome to the program, Richard. Thank you for joining me in the studio. I really appreciate you being here.
Oh, Jill, it's so cool to be here. Yeah, and if they want to check out about the Planet Cruise website itself, planetcruisecomedy.com is back up and running, and we're going to load it with comedy, some political comedy, some all kinds. But anyway, planetcruisecomedy.com. So good to be here, and hey, good to hear your voice, Swam.
Same with you. Same with you. It's just like you're in the room. It just feels like you're in the room.
It is just like I'm in the room. It's amazing.
And we actually have quite a crowd in this room tonight because of this show. We have people that have want to listen in. So there's others sitting here too. So the first thing, Steve, I'll go to you first. How did you become the cosmic comic Swami Beyondananda?
Well, it all began, actually, I started my life, my deformative years were spent in New York City, and there's something in the water there that creates comedy. When you say the word Brooklyn, people laugh. So I was a kid that loved comedy. You know, I'd have my parents call me in when there was a comedian on, Ed Sullivan, and I was the disruptive kid in school. Then you know that you're really chosen as this... I would call it a comedian archetype as opposed to the clown archetype. comedian archetype, you know that you're that the first time you're in the lunchroom and you make another kid laugh so hard that milk comes out of their nose. So that's like a sign from God. And I had a serious career, so to speak, in education. Started an alternative high school, wrote a book about it. I was teaching at Wayne State University in Detroit when a funny thing happened. I got laid off from my job, and the only job I could take was doing tree work for the city of Ann Arbor, Michigan. And it seemed like kind of a dead-end, dark night, but what really happened was a funny thing, and that is a fellow worker there who was a brilliant psychologist disguised as a truck driver said, "Hey, you're a writer. Let's start a little newspaper." So we started a funny newspaper for the guys at the shop, and that transformed my life and set me in the direction that I've been going in for the last 35 or 40 years. And another publication I started called Pathways in Ann Arbor, Michigan, we introduced the Swami Beyondananda character to provide a little levity to the spiritual practices that people took so seriously, and it ended up becoming the most popular feature in the paper. And in a way, I didn't do it, it did me. It happened to me, and so it set me on the course that I've been on for the last, right now it's 33 and a third years. So the Swami is 33 and a third years he's been doing it, meaning that I'm long playing.
Well, he certainly has become your alter ego, I think. Richard, what was your path to being a political comedian?
Well, I was born in the Deep South, Bakersfield, California. And, Bakersfield's, we got 323,000 people, 6 last names there. I mean, this is the kind of town it is. It is Thanksgiving dinner these days. You can imagine how awkward it is for me to go to Santa Cruz back to Bakersfield. But I mean, truly, I was raised in a family. We were really, education was honored, and but really, when it got down to it, when my family would go to the dump, we'd come back with more stuff than we took. Okay, man, I'm talking about this. We are early recycling, so reincarnation made a lot of sense, and I got into. Now the Swam knows all about reincarnation. I learned from him. He's one of my gurus. He just tells me, yeah. So I was at UCSC, and I had a girlfriend who got me into reincarnation. And it got me into my first activist moment because I gave a traffic cop, somebody else's license. And the cop goes, "Hey, this isn't you." And I said, "Well, not now." What a moron. And that was my first arrest in Santa Cruz. So, yeah, that was it. Yeah. I don't know. I was raised by the kind of Republicans that we wish Republicans were. I was a feral child. I was a feral child, basically, Jill. I was a feral child in Bakersfield, raised by Republicans. But when I came to Santa Cruz, like I say, I came to Santa Cruz and my spirit healed. And Santa Cruz was what really made me one of the far left. Yeah.
way over there.
I'm way over there, and sometimes it gets lonely out here, but
there are many people,
but not in Santa Cruz.
But not in Santa Cruz. Yeah. Now, Steve, just to get down to now some of the more serious and intense things. It's you talk about the Great Upwising. And just exactly what does that mean? And to get right into, being that intense, how can Americans experience an upwising when Fox News makes money doing the exact opposite through unwising millions on an hourly basis? I mean, Roger Ailes in the 70s directly told Nixon that the Republicans needed a propaganda network. And Ailes said, and I quote, "We have no obligation to tell the viewer anything not to our advantage," referring to the Republican Party. So indeed, this country must experience an upwising, but how do you see that happening when millions are being lied to or intentionally unwised every day? Will humor cut through the propagandic hold Fox News has on its viewers?
Well, it's interesting. I got to bring in another Santa Cruz character, Bruce Lipton. Bruce is a Santa Cruz resident, Santa Cruz area, and he and I wrote a book in 2009 called Spontaneous Evolution, Our Positive Future and a Way to Get There from Here. And we tell a meta-story in this. Bruce wrote Biology of Belief, which talks about how our beliefs and perceptions influence the outpicturing of our lives and reality and health and so on. And so spontaneous evolution is about our collective beliefs. If we look at the condition that we have right now, the Swami's word for it is a situation. We have a situation. But, the fact is that, as Marianne Williamson has very articulately pointed out in her presidential campaign, that Donald Trump is much more the symptom than the problem. He is an opportunistic infection that has insinuated itself into a system where, while you're absolutely right about Fox News and Powell Memorandum and all the brilliant stuff that you have in your book that really lays out how we've gone from a democracy to a mocracy by letting the power of money rule. It's also true that the Democrats have not really been willing to face the true heart of darkness. They've really not been willing to face the darkness in terms of the buying of political power, in terms of what America has stood for since the end of World War II. The fact is that we are an empire. And when Barack Obama, bless his heart, became president, he actually became the CEO of the American empire. And the American empire did not change under Barack Obama. In fact, there were more people appointed to regulatory positions, more Monsanto people appointed to regulatory positions than had been during the Bush administration. So the fed-upness of the American people in 2016 was a perfect storm of having the two worst possible candidates running. And as a friend of mine who voted for Bernie in the primaries but voted for Trump in the election, which I didn't do, by the way, as he said, we had two terrible choices and we chose one of them. Part of the reason why Hillary was defeated was because of the noise machine coming out of Fox News and Breitbart and all of those other entities. However, the other reason, which is more important for us right now as we try to mobilize a unifying movement, is that the Democrats have consistently been the brand of vote for us, we're not as bad as the other guys. And until and unless a real vision of where we want to go, rather than the positionality of what we have had, is presented, really not much is going to change. So the upwising is really about honoring the meta story and honoring the story that really there's, to really, really oversimplify it, but really it's a truthful oversimplification. We always are choosing between love and fear. And the upwising is waking up to the illusion of separation that's kept us separated and wising up to the power of love that is unifying. And as we look at two different ways of operating, it's either being on the battlefield and fighting one another and using all of our energy in that self and mutually destructive path, or it's in emerging from whichever side we perceive that we're on and finding the common truths together. And, the earlier email interchange we had today sent me back to look at the book I wrote with Joseph McCormick, the conservative transpartisan activist and pioneer. And I forgot about the transpartisan toolkit and how brilliant it is. And the work that Joseph did coming from the conservative side in bringing people together in mutually beneficial, respectful conversation where breakthroughs occurred and the sides learned from one another. And that's what the upwising is really about. It's taking people out of their silos. We're calling on conservatives, come out of your foxholes. progressives, come out of your NPR holes, because each of those two narratives is intentionally limited. It's intentionally designed to keep people separate.
Thank you, Swami. You're listening to Be Bold America on KSQD 90.7 FM. Many voices, one station. And listen worldwide online at ksqd.org. We're speaking with Steve Bhearman, who performs under the cosmic comic Swami Beyondananda, and Richard Stockton, who soon will be bringing back Planet Cruise Comedy to Santa Cruz on November 23rd at 7:30 p.m. at DNA's Comedy Lab. I'm your host, Jill Cody. Now, Richard, when we talked, you told me about a relative you had that signed the Declaration of Independence, and he was the only signer that was captured and tortured by the British. And by the way, he has the same name, Richard Stockton. Can you tell me a little bit more about him? Because I find this fascinating, because most people I know today don't realize as soon as they put pen to parchment, those 56 signers became traitors to the crown, including your relative.
Yeah, that is amazing, isn't it, this guy? Let me back up a little bit about this guy. So the Stocktons, all the stuff about immigration and ICE, we do jokes. Oh, ICE is going to come arrest me and send me back to Europe. But indeed, if they really fulfilled everything, they would, because when you talk about documentation and coming to this country, you know how their Stocktons are ubiquitous. We have we have towns named after us. For God, we have reproduced well, not perhaps intelligently, but that's another Bakersfield story. Okay. Don't you say that, Swami. All right, so there we are in, there's the Stockton boys. There's three of them. They're brothers, and they got thrown into the slammer in London, debtor's prison. And debtor's prison in the early 1700s. And they broke out of prison, stowed away on a boat, and came to America breaking all kinds of laws. I mean, they got here not only undocumented, they were criminals. And one of them migrated down into Virginia, and that's where my crowd came from. And one of them made it over to what is now Princeton University, and that's one of the offsprings was Richard Stockton, and this guy was all in. Man, he signed up. You can see it. It's on the second column from the right, big letters, Richard Stockton. And by the way, I just think I'd like to make a change. That's just a change in. You can see on my website, richardstockton.com. You can go to there and check this out. I'm just proposing that we change the Declaration of Independence so that his signature says richardstockton.com. I just think we should do that. Okay. But the guy himself was ratted out by neighbors, and they took him to New York. Ben Franklin and his buddies broke him out of jail, and he ended up going and dying about 4 years later of his wounds. And on his deathbed, after he lost everything, he said, I would do it all over again because I want my children to grow up in a free land.
That is such an amazing story. And I think what it points out is people today, 243 years later, don't realize that these were real people with real families and with real businesses, and how many had their lives ruined when they signed that Declaration of Independence so that we could be free people today.
Yeah.
And your distant relative is one of them. I just because I feel this is so important, I would just like to take 1 minute and share from my book, America Abandoned. I did write about these brave men who created this country because I think if people realize how much they lost to give us what we have today, we might have a better appreciation for the democracy democratic republic they tried to give us. And one Philadelphia merchant, Robert Morris, I like calling them by their first name, Robert, because they become more human that way,
Real,
too. Like your ancestor Richard was tortured and captured by the British and lost everything. Robert here was a merchant, and he lost 150 ships at sea during the war that led to his complete ruin. Another person, John Hart, John died alone and miserable 3 years later. You said your relative died 4 years later after the signing? Right. And his wife, John's wife, died soon before the Declaration of Independence, but his 13 children found themselves scattered among sympathetic families to hide from the British and conservative loyalists. So John never saw any of his 13 children again.
Yeah.
This is what many of them experienced. We hear about the major names like Thomas Jefferson and George Washington, etc. But there are other people. For example, Thomas Nelson. Tom died in debt at the age of 50 because he'd mortgaged his home to pay for the revolution, but the British seized his home and lands and damaged it so severely that he was unable to repay the mortgage. I mean, think about these stories if they happened today. And this is what they did for us. So I think it's just important to share with people that they were really real and gave everything for us. And 243 years later, we need to remember them. Swami, any thoughts?
It's really wonderful. Tom Hartman wrote a lot about the sacrifices that these people made, and we're in a very similar situation right now because the same kinds of forces that the revolutionaries fought against, which was basically they were up against the largest multinational corporation of their time, which was the British East India Company, in cahoots with the British military. So right now, what we have is a corporate state, and libertarian conservatives point to the government part of it and say they're the villain, and progressive liberals, point to the corporation part of the equation. But really, the two of them acting together in concert essentially has disenfranchised the American people. And perhaps we need an update. We need to reconstitute the Constitution, and we need to recognize that we've been disenfranchised by a system where only money matters. So I think that it's really important that we look at what happened and how this country got founded, and we're now at the next level where instead of calling on a few people, instead of looking outside of ourselves for leaders, essentially, as the Swami would say in his book, Swami for Precedent, we need a new precedent before we have a new president, government of the people, by the people, for the people, where the government does our bidding, not the bidding of the highest bidder. So the next evolution of revolution is recognizing that we, the people, acting in concert, speaking in one voice, is really what's going to make the big change. There's an organization called Represent.us. Perhaps you've heard of it.
Yes.
They have the Unrig the System conference. And I would go to their website, Represent.us, and they talk about things that 90 or 95% of the people in this country want to reduce the influence of money in politics. That's Democrats and Republicans. 90% of people want electoral reform so that real people count, votes are counted, and the votes count. However, because of the essentially the oligarchy that currently has control of both political parties and the mainstream media, the will of the people has been thwarted. And the election, and I put quote marks around that because he didn't really win, of Donald Trump, has a lot to do with people's disgust with the status quo. And the wave of the future and the upwising is recognizing that we are all in this together, that we are all cells in the same body, politic. And what we've had, this polarization that's been cultivated by the sociopathogens in the body politic, that hating one another conversation based on fear has essentially kept the two sides, kept, the 90% of us who are not sociopaths from gathering around the virtues and values that we have in common. We all want honest government. We all want clean air, clean food, clean water. But because of how the political conversation and discourse has been managed, we haven't been able to have that. So the evolution of revolution through organizations like Represent Us, through the National Town Square, which is a project that I'm working on, which would give every American a verifiable voice and vote in an independent advisory vote. These are the new institutions of society that will allow us to mature rather than being controlled and manipulated. We want to shift from, when we make the shift from public opinion to public will, then we're going to have a real evolution in this country.
Richard?
Yeah. Hey, Swam, so taking off from what you said and talking about your transpartisan toolkit and things like that, you never went with me down to my Bakersfield family, but you can probably imagine what that is like. Now there's professors and scientists, and then there's guys that spent most of their life working in the oil fields, and it gets real quiet around Thanksgiving dinner when we start talking about what's going on nationally. So how do we talk? How do I talk to a relative that I love this guy. I grew up with this guy. And he says he likes the way Donald Trump talks. How do I even live with that? Well, so I was down there on July the 4th. And there we are up at the Stockton Ranch. And, this is a special holiday. There was literally a big sign going into the ranch. No shooting today. I mean, seriously, this is the kind of thing it is. So, we're all having this meal, and they're asking me, I'm known as the hippie left-winger from Santa Cruz, and I'm getting some sideways eyes from people that I'm related to, and finally I said, I'd like to remind you all of a story. Jill, can I tell about a 3-minute story?
Let's hold that for station identification, and then we'll go to your story.
All right.
You're listening to Be Bold America on KSQD 90.7 FM, your ink spot on the dial. You may also visit KSQD's homepage and stream the station live to hear this show and all the wonderful other programs offered. Check the website for the program schedule.
Hello, K-Squid listeners. I'm Tom Hartman, and each weekday at 4 p.m., I bring you a different perspective on the news than you're likely to hear on most media outlets. Please join me on KSQD Santa Cruz, your ink spot on the dial for the Tom Hartman program, heard now for the first time ever in the Monterey Bay area at 90.7 FM, weekdays at 4 p.m. That's progressive talking conversation with me, Tom Hartman, weekdays at 4 p.m. on KSQD 90.7 FM. Tag, you're it.
Hello, this is Ralph Nader, and you are listening to KSQD, Santa Cruz's brand new community radio station.
Wow.
Now back to our guest, Steve Bhearman, the host of Wiki Politiki radio show. Visit wikipolitiki.com to learn more about the show's mission of fostering functional politics. And Richard Stockton, Santa Cruz's own political comedian, and who soon will be bringing back Planet Cruz comedy to Santa Cruz. I'm your host, Jill Cody. Richard, you had a story for us.
My God, you got these heavy, on the squid, you got these heavy hitters. That's awesome.
We do have heavy hitters. We're big time.
You are. I feel small here.
No, you are.
So anyway, we're sitting around, me and my redneck relatives and everything, right? I've had 232,000 people in Bakersfield, 6 last names, and Stockton is one of them, So anyway, we're sitting around, and they're kind of putting me on the spot, and they're waiting for me to just say something about the Second Amendment or whatever. And I said, slow down, everybody. Let's go way back. Let's go back to our great-grandfather. His name was Christopher Columbus Stockton. And he developed the Lakeside Ranch in Bakersfield. He moved the Stockton family from Santa Rosa down to Bakersfield, and he is this massive figure. He's well known by all the ranchers back in the late 1800s, feared by the railroads. And here is where Steve could actually probably be clearer about the history of it than me. But in the beginning, this corporate takeover of America really did start with the oil and the railroads. That was it. And the same forces that we are fighting today was exactly the same guys. They're the same crowd. And so the railroads were coming out. Now, all of my family, they were a bunch of ranchers and farmers, and this is the Old West, right? And the railroads, when they would acquire land for their right-of-ways, the first thing that they would do is try to buy it, so they would come and offer you money. And then if that didn't work, they would take you to court. And boy, they would line the judge's pockets, and that usually would work. And then if that didn't work, they'd send their thugs around and kill you. And that is how it worked. And the ranchers hated the railroads. Bandits would stay in my. Joaquin Murrieta was a friend of Christopher Columbus Stockton because he fought the railroads too. I mean, so one. I'm telling this, though I'm reminding everybody, but that part I didn't tell my relatives. But I go, let's remember C.C. Stockton, what he did on that July afternoon when he was sitting in the courthouse, in the Kern County courthouse, and one of his buddies, a fellow rancher neighbor, was on trial, and it was clearly railroading. That's where the name came from, railroading. Yeah. They were railroading him to take away his land. It was obvious the judge had been bought. It was just, and so the guys on the stand and the prosecutor, or the guy working for the railroad company, he was just twisting. They were twisting. The judge was twisting. And finally, Christopher Columbus Stockton had had enough. And he went outside and got on his horse and rode his horse. This is a matter of public record. Rode his horse up the steps of the Kern County courthouse, pushed the door open, and went and then took out his rifle and pushed the door open to the courtroom and rode his horse into the courtroom and trained his rifle upon the judge and announced that the trial was over. And his friend got off the witness stand and got on the back of his horse, and they turned around and they rode back to the Stockton farmhouse, which is actually still exists in my family today on A Street. I slept there many times. And they went back to the A Street house, and within minutes, hundreds of ranchers from Kern County showed up, heavily armed, surrounded the property. And when the law came out, they were facing an army of ranchers. And that man, the rancher that was on trial, has never had railroad tracks go over his property. And in fact, railroad tracks have never gone over that property to this day. So I'm reminding all my Trumplican friends this, and they and family, and they went, yeah. They were like they were hearing something far away and clear, something coming to them. That's right. This BS about job creators. In fact, one of them even turned to the other one and says, man, don't you just get tired of working in the oil field for Exxon after a while? Don't we get tired? And that was the first time in my life I had ever heard anybody say something that. So I'm going to turn it back over to Jill and the Swam, but I just think you can reach those family members who have taken a path. Maybe they don't understand the racism that they're signing on to. Maybe they don't understand the corporate greed that they call job creators. But if you go back I don't think comedians, frankly, can do anything. I honestly don't. But I think as individuals, we working with our families, when you go back and really get down with them, what does our family mean? And the Stockton family, man, we were in that fight a long time ago. And anyway.
Oh, thank you for sharing that. That was an amazing story. I sat here just mesmerized. Swami?
Well, that is really amazing because, and what a great piece of history. I back in the 70s, I taught auto workers in Detroit, part of the UAW on weekend college. I taught labor history. And many of those people did not realize that people died so that they could have what they have. Interestingly, in 1886, the way that corporate personhood became a part of our constitutional law, there was a case. There was a railroad company versus somebody else, and
it was Santa Clara County.
That's right. That's exactly right. Santa Clara County, and it wasn't even decided. It wasn't even decided by the court that corporations had the rights of persons, but the person writing the front notes was an employee and stooge for the railroad companies. And so in 1886, he wrote it in, and it's been established precedent since that time.
Oh, wow.
The farm labor movement, if you go back, anytime you drive past the Grange Hall, recognize that the Grange Hall was part of this farm labor movement, and that people in rural America and workers in the city had a lot in common 100, 120, 130 years ago. What's happened is that both political parties are corporate parties. And I can very easily get into a conversation with a right-wing Trump supporter and never talk about Donald Trump, and yet we agree on many, many, many things. They are not in favor of the banks controlling everything. They are not in favor of the corporations controlling everything. But because of the narrative that they've been fed, and because of how people are, because the progressive side doesn't understand that people don't make their decisions based on rational policy. They make their decisions based on emotions. And if you're able to stir up enough fear, you're able to manipulate people into believing almost anything you want. There is a group, one of the things that Joseph McCormick, my transpartisan friend, did is probably in the mid-2000s, I'm thinking maybe 2005 or so, he brought together leaders of organizations on both sides of the divide. And in one retreat, Joan Blades from Move On and Michelle Combs from Christian Coalition became friends. They had a lot in common, and they liked each other, just like, just like Richard, you liked your relatives. And so what they ended up doing was they created a transpartisan, we'll call it an action, where both of those organizations took out a full-page ad in the New York Times to preserve net neutrality, and between their two constituencies, they shut down the switchboards of Congress, and they got their way. So when you take people out of their silo and you put them in a situation where the rules of engagement are such that there is mutual respect and ways of having conversations. And by the way, Joan Blades has since, with a conservative activist, John Gable, created something called Living Room Conversations, and I've been part of that. And it's really, you invite friends and relatives or who are not the same political affiliation as you are, and there's certain ways of the beginning conversations are really about rehumanizing one another. In other words, when somebody's on the other side, it's very easy to dehumanize them, and both sides do that. And what happens is all of a sudden there are new possibilities. And Joseph, I was at this group that he did up in Seattle, and what a raucous group it was. These people were yelling at each other on all sides. But finally, after a number of months of meeting, When all the yelling was over, they actually began learning from one another because there was a foundation of, well, I don't agree with this guy or this gal, but I like them. And what happens is you begin to recognize the functional reasons why people make the decisions that they do. And you come to respect that. Think about the ranchers. Where were they, though, who took up arms against the government because they didn't want they wanted to graze on quote unquote federal lands. In a certain regard, they're as much the graduates of the farm labor movement as the left is. It's just that right now both sides are pretty much two sides of the same corporate coin. You're not going to find the mainstream Democrats going up against Monsanto, for example. They're not. You're not going to find them really going up against the banks. One of the things that happens through the transpartisan engagement is that progressives began to learn about the Federal Reserve. And, Ellen Brown, if you've read her book, Web of Debt, she has a new book out about the banking system. I first ran into her at Praxis Peace Conference, which is definitely a progressive conference. However, a lot of her research came from right-wing libertarian conservatives. So she has been able to create a movement beyond that is really looking at the meta picture, which is that we've been drawn into these culture wars when really we have a lot more in common than we have in opposition. It's just that the wedge ideas and the oppositional ideas have been cultivated very carefully by the media and by the two political parties. Because think about it, I'm on Democrat and Republican lists, so through the elections you get the ooga booga, Donald Trump, give me $3. Or on the other side, it was ooga booga, Hillary Clinton, give me $3. So each side is blackmailing their constituency and using the worse, the lesser evil, the greater evil on the other side. But ultimately, you can't be supporting an evil even if it's the lesser evil. So, and I know I'm sounding very serious for a comedian, and Richard understands my serious side. But really...
He's a serious man.
I'm a very serious
You got
man.
serious problems, too. I we could do a couple hours on his.
That'd be another show. We'll do that.
Yeah.
But it's funny. At the transpartisan political citizen summit about 10 years ago, there were people from across the board, I have to tell you. And I did comedy for everybody. And at the end, this is really it was as shocking to me as it was to everybody else. But people who I had the closest connection with, for some reason, were the right-wing militia people from Idaho.
Why is that? How could that happen?
I think it happened because there was mutual respect.
Oh, you gave them something to push up against. Yeah.
Well, but it was something to push up against in the context of me seeing that they actually had a certain degree of courage to look at the heart of darkness that progressives have not been able to do. Progressives were AWOL when it came to looking into the real story behind the Kennedy assassination or the Martin Luther King assassination. And when you let these perpetrations stand and they're not challenged, then the perpetrations get worse and worse and worse and worse. And if we look at, here's another example. Had the Democrats and Al Gore stood up to the bully Republicans in Florida in 2000 and prevailed, those people who died in the Iraq War would still be alive. And those people who are maimed in the Iraq War would have their limbs and their psyches intact.
And on that profound note, I need a station identification. You're listening to Be Bold America on KSQD 90.7 FM. Many voices, one station. We're speaking with Steve Bhearman, also known as Swami Beyondananda, and Richard Stockton, Santa Cruz's political comedian. And immediately following Be Bold America is New Dimensions. This week on New Dimensions, a conversation with Michael Meade. Even though it may seem like the end of things, Meade reminds us that there are always beginnings embedded in the endings. He takes us on a mythological journey that tips the world towards renewal and asks, why not find our own thread even in the midst of uncertainty and pain and learn how to weave and create. New Dimensions airs Sunday at 6 p.m. here on K-Squid 90.7 FM, immediately following Be Bold America. Also, wanting to acknowledge some of our contributors, I wanted to thank, I think it's Chunky Blue, Orrin Hutchinson, Jennifer Young, Brian Miller, Adria London. Thank you for supporting KSQD. And you inspire us. You continue to inspire us to give you our very best at 90.7 FM. You may also inspire others to donate on our website, ksqd.org. And it's just like the two gentlemen I have on the show today. It inspires me and inspires our listeners, Steve Bhearman and Richard Stockton. Back to our guests. So, Richard, thoughts?
Yeah, I got them.
Good. Maybe one.
Oh my God! I cannot. Yeah.
Well, one thing we want to talk about is what can listeners keep doing, stop doing, and start doing?
Yeah. How do we get it moving? Okay. Here's one thing I was thinking about. There's so much to do that to say anything is more important than overcoming racism, overcoming sexism, letting women have an equal foot, all that. Yeah. But the thing about climate change, which catches my mind, is that if we really screw that one up, the others become very moot, and we're living in caves again. And let's talk about racism and women's lib then. Yeah. So climate change, I'm flummoxed by how we get people to move on climate change. And this is something I would like to put my shoulder to the wheel with, and I don't know how. But I was thinking, maybe this would help. Guess what? Climate change is going to kill wine as we know it.
And coffee.
A new study from the National Academy of Sciences says the wine-producing regions of the world are threatened by global warming. And get this, by 2050, even the French village of Chardonnay will not be making Chardonnay. Is this sick? This is the most, that is, yeah. And by 2050, Napa Valley will look like Bakersfield does now. Bakersfield will look like Bakersfield does now. In 2050, there'll be no Chianchino, life force completely gone. The town of weed will be growing no weed. Napa will have no car parts. Tuscany will be too hot to grow tusks. It'll be too hot for glassware and Corning. The people of Ione will own nothing. Fairfield will be renamed Foulfield. Victorville will be renamed Loserville. Watsonville will be elementary, my dear Watsonville. That doesn't even make sense. Swan, what happened to me there? I kind of fell apart there at the end. The heat.
Oh, no, that was a wonderful rep. I love that rep.
The Watsonville will be elementary, my dear Watsonville? Because it's simple.
Put the what in Watsonville.
Put the what? The what?
Put the what in Watsonville.
Yeah, the
when
what?
When everything is taken out, there'll be no what. There'll be no what in Watsonville when everything is taken out.
There'll be the Sunville. Yeah, the Sunville.
Sunville. Yeah. Just Sun, because it'll be just baked.
In San Geronimo, people are going to be jumping out of airplanes. Just Geronimo. I don't know, man.
Swami, You have some keep, stop, starts for our listeners?
Well, I think everything Richard said is right on target. Mm-hmm. Climate change is the game changer. I have just recently been following Marianne Williamson's campaign. I went and watched many things that she's done, and to me, she really typifies the upwising, because she really recognizes that the only way to overgrow, rather than push against, we all know that the more you push against something, the more power you give it. But the way to overgrow is through focusing on what we have in common, through love, through our connections together, rather than fighting and pushing against all of these other things. What do we really want? What do we want? And part of what the upwising is about having people really ask the question, what is the future that we desire, rather than being drawn into these polarizing conversations. In fact, the culture wars have already been won. We won that. We won, the rights for black people to vote. We won women's rights. We've won all that. And so we need to act like winners rather than losers. Mm-hmm. And part of the progressive meme has been to continue to act like underdogs even when we're overdogs. So let's actually be the overdogs that we are, and instead of engaging in arguments with the other side, and I've really had to do this. It's really hard for me because I love the zingers, and I love to, send people zingers and all of that. And there's plenty, and in my routine, there's plenty of jokes about Donald Trump. It's everywhere. He's ubiquitous. But the point is that we need to actually seriously come together and say, what do we really want to create together? What is the world that we want to create, rather than being reactive to all of these things that are pulling us into this polarizing conversation? Very interesting that Marianne Williamson got a really good review by the American Conservative magazine, because they were saying, wow, she's speaking truth. And when you listen to the rest of the Democratic candidates, they're basically speaking political speak inside of a party line. Some exceptions, of course. And I certainly agree with what Bernie and Elizabeth Sanders are talking about, economic justice. It's absolutely criminal that we have no middle class here in this country anymore. And, people have been manipulated by Fox News, et cetera, et cetera. So I think it's really, really important that we rehearten ourselves and recognize that above and beyond the linear, secular, political conversation is a spiritual conversation. And the spiritual conversation has to do with the unity in life, with the recognizing that, that every spiritual and ethical tradition has some version of the golden rule at the foundation. And what I'm looking to do with the Great Upwising, you heard of the Million Man March. I'd like the billion humans stand, where a billion people around the world say we are standing for the golden rule, because we recognize that's the only way to overrule the rule of gold. That if we recognize that the power of money has taken over because there hasn't been this sense of sacred at the center of our communities that is bigger than religion and bigger than non-religion. If we cultivate that sacred center, and believe me, there are so many forces around the country that are gathering to do that, you just don't see it in mainstream media because it doesn't fit their narrative. Well, so we have to overgrow that media like you're doing on your show.
Thank you. Well, one thing I'd like to slip in here is to answer Richard's question about what can he do with the climate crisis, because
lay it on me.
Swami was talking about all the battles we've won, and we haven't won the fight against climate change, or now called the climate crisis. The weather has changed, and we need to create a cooler world. And I'll just slip in here that my most recent book is Climate Abandoned, and does have the Keep, Start, Stops.
You wrote a book called Climate Abandoned?
Climate Abandoned, we're on the endangered species list. Yes, it became an Amazon #1 bestseller last Earth Day. And it has at the end of each chapter, Keep, Stop, Starts, because everyone knows about the issue, but they don't know what they can do. So I'm just slipping that in. And then,
I want to buy one.
Do you have any other Keep, Stop, Starts, Richard, that you want listeners to know about with this?
Keep, Stop, Starts. So this is what is that?
Come closer. Yeah.
Come closer.
Yeah.
What is this?
What the listeners could keep doing, stop doing, and start doing to help reunite this country and save our democracy. Swami?
We got it. Okay. We got it. I guess, truth to power.
Yes.
Speaking up, getting together. When somebody conflates weather and climate change, going, "Wow, it got cold last weekend," and I guess you're full of crap about this. You're carrying around Jill's book like you know something, Stockton. By the way, I want to buy that book. And then you could just tell them. I had an experience with my Trump relatives. They were going. It's amazing I say that, but it's true. And they're going, "But Richard got a colder than hell last winter. What are you talking about, climate change?" And I said, "Boy, gentlemen, weather is temporary. Climate is
a trend.
It's a trend. Yeah. It's over time. Weather is short term, climate's over time, and it's like we could say." Weather is Van Gogh's Starry Night, or climate is Salvador Dali's melting clocks. It's like it moves. Weather is scrubbing crayon off the living room wall, and climate is scrubbing blood out of the living room carpet. Okay, that one got him. That one got my relatives, and that's
good.
That's when I reached him.
Good.
That's what I got. It's a good one.
I want to thank Steve Bhearman. Check him and his alter ego out at wakeuplaughing.com and Richard Stockton at planetcruisecomedy.com. And thank you to you for joining us, and I hope you'll tune in next time on Be Bold America. On our next show, Sunday, September 1st at 5 p.m., we'll be on Democracy's Fix, and we'll be talking with Caroline Fredrickson, president of the American Constitution Society in Washington, D.C., and the author of Democracy's Fix, How to Win the Fight for Fair Rules, Fair Courts, and Fair Elections. And joining me in the studio will be Mike Rotkin, 5-time mayor of the city of Santa Cruz. I want to thank Emily Dunham, Be Bold America's program assistant, for her technical support. And another big thank you to today's terrific guests, Steve Bhearman and Richard Stockton. You're listening to KSQD 90.7 FM Santa Cruz, 97.7 FM, many voices, one station, and listen worldwide online at ksqd.org. Stay tuned for New Dimensions with Justine Willis Toms. My name is Jill Cody. Keep, Stop, Start.